Okay, let's see if it's working now. Yeah, it looks like that's working now. Okay, good. All right. So there's that. Sorry for you guys that are on Zoom. It was taking a while. There's technical difficulties. So generally speaking, we'll start on time, and it should be able to be recording the whole time. Hopefully it is recording, but I didn't hear it say that it was. Okay, it is. Okay, cool. And I'll post those after class. Usually within a week, I'll have those posted since we're only meeting on Mondays. Okay, so let's do the course then. Let's go over the course and what the expectations are with the course. We have, when you guys come in here to the Canvas course is what I'm talking about here. When you guys come to the Canvas course, you'll have your announcements at the top, whatever the top announcements are. I recommend going through on that right side and making sure that you're like closing out the announcements so you can keep up with the to-do stuff on the right as well. But if you're not that person, that's fine too. You can always go to assignments. When you're in student view, the assignments should be listed by due date. You can set it to sort by grouping and things like that too, but it should be listed by due date. And so if you're one of those people that just clicks through what is due, your lectures will pop up in that because your lectures are going to be seen in the concept maps. And so the concept maps, basically I have all of my learning objectives on every assignment there, what you're supposed to be learning from that stuff. You can access the whole unit objectives by clicking at the top, and it'll open all of the learning objectives for each chapter in that whole unit. So this is what will be on the unit exam. I write my unit exam questions from my learning objectives. This is exactly the same as what the nursing program does. And so I'm trying to set you guys up for success, getting used to thinking this way, because if you can answer my learning objectives, you should be set up well for the course. Now, that doesn't mean you answer the questions and you memorize the answers, right? That means that you answer it, but you're able to apply that information, because my questions on the test, I might ask you to literally define what a tapeworm is, but I also might ask you to apply it to a situation. And if you were able to define it, I expect you to be able to apply it as well, okay? So our exams, we have 50 question exams. It'll be 35 of those questions will be multiple choice, and the other 15 are short answer. Essay questions is what it is, literally is on Canvas, but I expect like you could even answer some of those questions with one word. And so I don't expect more than 2 sentences of an explanation in those. I don't expect full essays, okay? So most of the time it's gonna be like define a term, or if this was a scenario going on, what would you expect to see, or something like that, okay? I do have critical thinking. I focus quite a lot on critical thinking questions in my course, especially on the exams, and that's why we're doing this format, so we can start applying that information and thinking outside of just memorizing the terms, right? So the critical thinking questions would be like, I give you a patient scenario, and then you apply that information to that patient scenario. And so we'll have some examples of that coming up before the unit 1 exam. You'll get an announcement with some examples of what I consider to be critical thinking questions. And so for now, focus on learning and applying in the classroom, and then you'll get some examples of what to expect with those critical thinking questions. And if you don't know this, the nursing program teaches toward the NCLEX, and we have an extremely high rate of pass on the NCLEX for the students that do get as far as taking the NCLEX. But our nursing program, again, less than half of you will make it to that point as what their statistics are right now. So I want to make sure that that number is rising, and I want to be sure that all of you guys who are taking my class are well prepared for the nursing program, and so we can get you guys succeeding better, so that you're not wasting all of your money here on your prereq courses and then failing out of nursing, right? We don't want to see that. So we want to set you guys up for success. We teach you guys how to learn, because I mean, I hate to say it, if we're being honest with ourselves, the Oklahoma education system isn't setting you up for learning. It's just not. They teach to pass a test, and I don't think that helps us a lot, right? Because whenever you guys are in healthcare, you aren't going, it's not going to help you to remember how a gram stain is done, but it might help you understand why. If you know why gram stains are done, it might help you understand better how to diagnose and treat your patient. One thing that I tell my students a lot is I remind you guys, like, I might end up in a hospital. My sister, my husband, my family members might end up in a hospital where you're the nurse. And I, when I see your face, want to be relieved, not terrified that you're the nurse, right though? So that's the thing. So I kind of get a sense of what kind of effort people are putting in my class. And hopefully if I see you in my class and I think, okay, this person isn't doing the work that I expect, that hopefully that would step up as you go through the nursing program. But I also don't want to already have that disposition to think that you don't know your stuff. So for an example of that, one that I give often is a lot of us might know that we use 0.9% sodium chloride as our saline solutions. Whenever you go to the hospital, they set you up with a saline solution, right? And just FYI, it's 0.9%. I'm not necessarily going to answer this question or go over this in detail of the why, but instead was why do they use 0.9%? And so you might think, oh, well, because it's equal to like the salt concentration in the cells or in the body, in the blood, right? Why is that important? How does that affect the body? And so that's critical thinking, being able to think through that and actually answer that. So we will talk about that concept in this class. And we're going to talk about isotonic, hypertonic. This is stuff you've probably talked about in chemistry, but I'm going to apply it to actual real world situations and make it applicable. We didn't learn that stuff for nothing. The only required course that you have to take before you come to microbiology is chemistry. And most of you guys took GOB, right? So that's the one that has a little bit of biochem in it. And when I tell you we're going to use chemistry concepts every single day in this course, I mean it. And so one of the most important concepts in microbiology is pH. And we're going to be talking about pH all of the time. I'm not as concerned that you can do a calculation with it. I'm not as concerned that you can recall what the formula is for pH, but I am concerned that you understand the difference between an acid and a base and what that means for the cells and how that affects the cells. And not just the cells, but their proteins and things like that. So we'll talk about that in this course. And we'll review some of the chemistry concepts in chapter 2. That's what chapter 2 is for. It's like chemistry of life and life systems. So that stuff, it is just a prereq for a reason. We'll say that, okay? So anyway, so all of your lectures, all of the learning objectives for each chapter are in those concept map assignments. So you'll have the learning objectives. There is a lecture. I have updated these from recordings from last semester or something equivalent to it. There were some times with weather last semester where we didn't have a class or we didn't have a recording for it. And so I told them to watch a previous lecture. So when that's the case, I try to pick the most recent ones so that it is in alignment with what I expect you to learn as much as possible, okay? So I basically test from my learning objectives. All the information to clarify what I expect you to know in the learning objectives is in the lectures, and the textbook is just there to supplement that. I will not teach outside of that. I won't test outside of that. So none of your test questions will be some random thing out of the textbook that I didn't cover in my lectures. Never. I pride myself on that, okay? So use your textbooks as a way to supplement. If you don't understand something in my lecture, go to the textbook and see if it explains it. You can also, I am not averse to you guys using ChatGPT and stuff like that. Like, can you explain this concept as simply as possible to ChatGPT and then plug that concept in there? Just be aware, ChatGPT does give incorrect answers. It is not always correct. Do not lean on it for all of your factual stuff. And absolutely, it is terrible at making infographics. So if you have to make a concept map, and this isn't me just saying this so that you'll do the work, it's literally like I had students at the end of my semester during my summer when I piloted the concept map thing that I don't want to say got lazy, but like some of them decided to depend on ChatGPT to make their concept maps, and it misspells words and stuff like that. And that is part of the grading aspect, okay? So if it has some random weird thing on there that we didn't learn about, or if you have misspelled words on there or something, I'm assuming that you're using AI, just be sure you edit that stuff somehow. Look over it, make sure it's all correct before you submit it. I have no problem with you using AI to help you make that stuff. Just be sure you're double checking it and making sure that it's accurate, because you do get graded on that stuff. So anyways, here's the lectures. So I had quite a few people asking me where the lectures were. And so I do expect you guys to at least make your notes and stuff. You can play my lectures on double speed if you want to. Good luck with that. I talk at this speed in my lectures as well. So it's kind of not a double speed friendly type of a lecture, but maybe 1.5, maybe 1.25, you guys will be okay with that. I'm just warning you. The assignment explanation, what I expect from a concept map, and there is an example from the previous semester from one of my students, and she got the highest grade in the class, and this was Angela Novi. She's in her 3rd semester in the nursing program, I believe now. So anyways, this is an example of what I expect on the concept maps. You notice like it's not like there's a just crap ton of information on there. She's outlined the main topics. She's answered basically what is expected within the learning objectives. in each of these bubbles, and they're color coded basically on like what the main subject matter is. So all of the green bubbles are kind of related, all the blue ones. You don't have to do it exactly like this. Do it in a way that works for you and that makes sense to you. And so how did she make her concept map? She used GoodNotes. I highly recommend GoodNotes. So if you have a laptop or a tablet, GoodNotes should work for you. Now, GoodNotes is definitely more useful if you have a touch screen or a tablet that you can write on. I feel like it's more useful there, but that doesn't mean you can't make concept maps if you don't have GoodNotes. You can still do them on paper. I have plenty of students that would do theirs on paper and just take a picture and upload that. That is fine too. Okay, but if you don't have GoodNotes, it is an app on the iPad, and I'll have my iPad here so I can kind of show you. Pull it up. You guys won't see this on Zoom, but let me share my screen on Zoom. All right, so this is the concept map for those of you guys that are on Zoom. Anyways, on GoodNotes, it is $10 a year to subscribe to it. And it's sort of like your notes app where you can like write on it or type in it and whatever, and then you can choose colors to circle, and there's highlight functions and everything like that. So if you haven't used it yet, I do highly recommend it. So for example, I have like some study charts that I made for Unit 3 on here, where you can just write on the page and like it can be the full page and whatever. You can zoom in, and so you can make little smaller notes on there and whatever. So I highly recommend it. There's highlight functions, there's circle functions, there's shape functions, there's write with hand. You can even write with hand and then convert it into typed text if your handwriting is bad, or you want it to be more legible for any reason. You can literally just circle it and then convert it to text. So if you guys haven't used GoodNotes before, highly recommend GoodNotes. So this student used GoodNotes to make her concept map here. And anyway, so I love GoodNotes. I think it's so good for taking notes because it helps you organize things. And you can even like I said, if you make something smaller, zoom in on it and you can read more detail on it, but it's all still on one page, which is something that I like. Something about that organization, having it kind of in 1 or 2 pages is so it helps me breathe easier. I have a lot of students that come to me saying that they have ADHD or things like that. So do I. And so if I can make it through an Ivy League school with ADHD, you can do this. Okay, I'm not smarter than you. I just know more about microbiology than you do. Bet that you know more about other things than I do. This just makes me knowledgeable about microbiology. That's the only reason why I have this job. Okay, so I'm not smarter than you, and don't ever think that because I'm a professor that means that. And don't let anybody treat you that way either, please. Okay. To be clear, if you guys are going into nursing, I mean, I can't speak for all health, especially vet. Like I can't speak for vet stuff, right? Vet tech stuff, especially. But nursing, the average starting pay for a nurse here in Oklahoma is $40 an hour. Okay, so that's about more than $80,000 a year. I make 51. So if I'm teaching you to have a job that pays higher than the job that I'm working in, I expect you to be good at what you're doing, right? So don't also sometimes you'll see me get frustrated. You'll see me get frustrated about the fact that I only get paid 51K. Because let's be honest about that, that's nothing. Like I see your face back there, you're like, your face basically like, what do you mean? Like, yes, I only get paid 51K. I'm being dead serious about that. And this is public information. If you guys ever want to look up any of your professors' information on what they get paid and what the administration gets paid and stuff like that, this is all public information because we're a state institution. So this isn't me being petty. This is the truth. Like you guys could look this up if you wanted to. So, and I'm a professor here at OSU who won a teaching award for teaching excellence. So you can only win it once a year and only one person gets it every year. And I won it the first year I was eligible. So that should also put into perspective my dedication to excellence for you guys, despite the fact that I only get paid 50K. So I'm here to try to help you guys learn how to learn, and the hope is that eventually we will get recognized for that effort with the money and not just with a pat on the back and a pizza party, right? So yes. So anyways, that's kind of the idea with the concept maps too, is that I expect you guys just to show me that you're understanding the information enough to organize it. Now this first one, this is for chapter 1. So if you guys were to copy this one, I just ask that you do it in your own words. Like if you were to rewrite this all in your own handwriting, that's enough for chapter 1, okay? I'm not too worried about, you have to answer a different question. So that's the other thing in this assignment. You make the concept map and then you answer a question, one of these questions, number 5, write a short reflection on this information. It's just like, what connection surprised you? What concept was hardest? Or how does this apply to healthcare? Those are the questions. And so just write something briefly. It really surprised me that pH can affect how all of the proteins in my body work, something like that, right? So I don't need a full on like essay about it. If you want to write an essay, don't let me stop you. But just that, just showing me that you're thinking about this information as information and not just regurgitation. That's not going to get you very far in my course, right? And it's not going to get you far in nursing. My idea is that my course is set up in a way, yeah, I want you to learn microbiology and apply it, but that you'll learn this as a habit that'll help you moving forward in your other courses. So that's the concept map assignment. The other aspect of the lecture, so lecture really just has the concept map, which those are due before you come to the lecture. So obviously not today, but you'll notice that for next Monday, by next Monday, you have to have had done chapters 1 and 3, which we're covering today, and chapters 2 and 4, which we're doing next Monday. So something that's on our lecture concept maps, you'll see drop the 2 lowest scores. So if you don't want to do chapter 1 or chapter 3, that's 2 you can drop, but you still have to learn the information for the exam, right? Or if you want to wait till another more stressful part of the semester and not do a concept map to save yourself some time or whatever. So you can miss 2 concept maps, right? So the other part is the lecture application activities, which this is the stuff we're doing in class. So these won't pop up in your assignment to-do list. They'll be at the very bottom because they don't have due dates, but I enter those grades in for you guys. So if you showed up and you participated, I'll give you 10 out of 10 points, okay? So these, you'll also see drop the 2 lowest scores. So if there is a day that you don't know the answer or a day that you can't join in or something like that, the 2 lowest scores for this do get dropped. So that's zeros for that, or whatever. And I might make that more than 2 later on, since for now it's 2, okay? So keep that in mind. So you can miss 2, or I guess 1 meeting because there's 2 in each day. So keep that in mind too, or you might not know an answer. If you don't know an answer and you want to avoid having to lose points for that, you don't know an answer. If I say, can you explain what this is? And you just tell me, I don't know, then you get a 0 for that part of it, okay? But it will drop that 0 later on. You know what I'm saying? But stay on your stuff and try to be participating in the information. If you've made your concept maps, they'll help you quite a lot in navigating the questions that we go over in class. And you can use stuff. Whenever I call on you guys, we're going over the Kahoot stuff. Look it up in your notes when I call on you. Have your concept maps out when I call on you. There's no rules about like no open notes when I'm doing this stuff. I want you guys to be thinking and using that information and working with that. And if you're having issues with that, that's the time when we start talking about that stuff and discussing it. One thing that I'm also, the whole reason I'm calling on everybody every day is the more comfortable we are with being wrong about something, the better, honestly, because you're going to get called on and you won't know why that right answer is right or why the wrong answer is wrong. But if you can start thinking with me about the content, that shows me that that framework is there, but we just need to figure out how to make the connections better. It also, you won't be the only one. So if you don't know the answer to the question, bet that there is at least one other person in this room, if not a whole handful, if not the whole class, that doesn't know how to answer what I'm asking. And so that's something that we have to be comfortable with, because whenever you guys are going into nursing, when you're going into healthcare, when you're going into vet tech, wherever you're going, that you're going to have those situations where you're not going to know what to do in that particular moment. And you have to be comfortable with asking questions. You have to be comfortable with speaking up for yourself. Because again, if you're a person that doesn't know how to ask for help or is too uncomfortable to ask for help, you have no business putting your hands on a person or somebody's pet, right? So we have to get over that anxiety of it. Does it cause anxiety? Yes. Will some of this stuff be more anxious than probably you're comfortable with for a little bit, but you'll get used to it. I promise you that'll get better. Anyway, so that's the lecture application activities. For example, the one that we'll be doing today is on here, and it opens up like this. And we have these scenarios, and it asks us to define whether they're these things. We're going to do this one today, so I'm not going to get into it right now. But we'll go over this stuff today. And there's 5 questions in all of them. So it shouldn't be too taxing. This part of the course, this review stuff, it's meant to be more relaxed and conversational. Okay, it's not meant to be like constant quizzing and stress and all that stuff. It's meant to help us engage a little bit more. So that's the actual lecture part of it. There are lecture quizzes as well. Let me close this back out. So we have lecture concept map, where you'll watch the lecture and make your notes and your concept map, and then we'll come to class. We'll do the lecture application activity in class. And then after that lecture, there are chapter quizzes. Okay, and they're 10 questions. They're timed, but they're not on Lockdown browser or anything. So once you start it, you should have your information together. If you've made your concept map, just use your concept map. There's no Lockdown browser. You can have it open. You can also search within the notes. If you don't know how to do that, this is a thing that a lot of students had issues. So in your concept maps, I not only have the lecture, I have the slides. And so let's say I download those slides and I open it with PowerPoint. Okay. And you want to enable editing. Even if you're not going to be using it, you would want to enable editing for it. And if you don't have PowerPoint or something on your computer, you can actually download them for free being an OSU OKC student. So if you haven't done that already, I highly recommend that. Of course, this is going to have me do sign-in stuff for this. But basically, you can search within the slides by using Control F. Or on my iPad thing, it's like this little, what is it? I have no markers up here. I bought like 20 markers for this classroom. It's a little symbol that looks like this. I think it's like command or something, but it depends on what kind of computer you're using. If you're using Apple, it might look like this. But that plus F is the same. And then you can just search for whatever the term is relating to whatever your question is and find it in the notes. Like I said, the quizzes are timed, but it's 15 minutes to answer 10 multiple choice questions. So there should be plenty of time to work through that stuff. But I time it so that you have to have some sort of reference to the information before you take the quiz. And it is one try on those ones. So be aware of that. All right. Oh my gosh. Like I said, I haven't gotten the push for it. There it goes. Here we go. 6. That takes a minute. But anyways, another thing you can do is use these notes. If you go over to view, I think it is. Yes, view, and go to outline view, it has all of the text on there. And so you can literally, guys, copy all this text. Like this is obviously just McGraw-Hill stuff, but copy it from this slide down and then paste it into ChatGPT and say, make, a concept map of this, or make an outline, and then you could build your outline from the concept map or build your concept map from the outline that ChatGPT gives you. Try to have ChatGPT build you a concept map, but you'll have to probably adapt it a little bit to have the information in there. But that's all there so that you could find that. And if you wanted to do the search function, let's say you don't remember what germ theory is, you just go Control F, it pops up find and replace, and just look for germ theory. And it'll find all those instances. Just click through. Thank you, Siri. You can just click through and find all those instances of germ theory and where it's described in there, for example. Okay, so that's all there for you guys to use as a research resource for that. Okay, so that's the general everyday lecture stuff. Other than that, lecture has a project and lab has a project. The lab project, we pretty much work through it together. And then there's some questions at the very, very end of the semester that you'll answer about your microbe. But hopefully you figured out what your microbe is. Everybody's assigned a random one at the beginning of the semester. And we work through tests throughout the whole semester, whether you're positive or negative for tests. And then we use that information to figure out what your microbe is at the end of the semester, and you make a report for that. But we kind of work through that all together. The thing that we won't work through with the chapter stuff is the disease case study project. There's a separate assignment for this that reminds you to sign up for your disease, just FYI. But you basically pick a disease, which you'll click this link here, and you'll just sign up for any disease. I mean, there is a ton of diseases on here. So find one that you like. These are all infectious based. They're all contagious diseases. So you're not going to find diabetes on here. You're not going to find breast cancer on here because this class doesn't focus on that kind of disease. We focus on infectious stuff. So you find a disease on here, you'll just sign up for it. And it is first come, first serve. And each section, like all 4 of my sections pull from this one area. So that way I don't have like somebody in this section and somebody in my online section doing the exact same disease and just making the same presentation together. Everybody has to make their own, covering their own disease, okay? So that's that, but you'll sign up here. There is a due date. There is a due date. Yes, so the online students do have the lecture application activity. You just will have it as an assignment you have to submit on your own. So let me actually show you that really quick. For online, because some of my online students obviously join our in-person sessions. So for online, your lecture application activities, really quickly, assignment. It doesn't help that the internet is crazy slow. So for online, you'll just have like those same exact questions. It's 5 questions, but you'll have to answer all 5 of them. And you'll also have to do the Kahoot quiz. So you'll do the Kahoot quiz. And when you complete the Kahoot quiz, you'll take a screenshot just saying you completed it. I do not care if you're online, what grade you get on it. You just have to do the whole quiz and show me that you did it. And then answer these 5 questions. So it's a little bit different setup, but they have to answer, online people have to answer all the questions on their own. Whereas in-person people, we walk through everything, right? And so that's a major difference with that level of effort that they see on there. I feel like you're losing a little bit there, but you will be graded on answering that as well as doing the Kahoot thing for online. But back to the in-person stuff, that disease case study, you'll sign up for the disease. And then it's like before we start unit 4, like that day that we start unit 4 is when your disease case study project is due. And then instead of doing Kahoots and me reviewing case studies and things like that, it'll be you guys presenting during that time. And that's what we'll be doing with our time. So you'll present on your disease during that time. And so if chapter 19 covers skin and eye diseases, then on chapter 19 and 20 day, the chapter 19 skin and eye disease people will present. And then chapter 20 is nervous system disease people. So those people would be presenting on that Monday, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? You guys following with that? Okay, so that's all there, but it won't be due until unit 4 comes around. So we've got a while, but if you want to start signing up for your diseases, you can do that. And then there is an assignment that will remind you. It comes up as an assignment, sign up for your disease. So you guys won't forget about it and you'll have plenty of time in between the sign up and the due date to get your presentation put together. Okay. I set up, that's why I have the lectures in the assignment, because I have a lot of students that just click through the assignments and never even go look at the other like module and lecture materials and things like that. Can you make it? Yes. But if I can force you to have to click on the link, then that's usually better than what most people get. And then of course our exams, which we went over already. Okay. The final is semi-comprehensive. Basically, it's like 100 questions. 50 of them are unit 4. 50 of them are units 1 through 3. And so that's why I say semi-comprehensive, because it's kind of like having unit 4 and a comprehensive in one setting. So final, but other than that, it's the exact same format. Okay. So, all right, lab stuff. We'll go over the lab stuff in a little more detail in lab, but to orient you guys with that stuff, we have our pre-labs that have to be done before we go to lab. Today isn't the case, right? So on Wednesday, you will have had to have pre-labs 0 and 1 all done, right? But these are all on Connect. And so when you click on these, it should take you to Connect to go through those stuff. And I posted a tutorial for this on my online class, but if you're having issues with my in-person class with figuring out how to work the Connect thing and actually do the lab simulations, then let me know and I'll post that same tutorial for you guys as well. But they're pretty straightforward. You just click along with whatever the instructions are on the screen and you should be able to knock them out pretty quickly. And I might go over that in lab when we get to lab. But we have pre-lab assignments. They are simulations that you do online that need to be done before we come to class. Then in class, I give a little lecture over what we're learning. And I do a demonstration that is meant for you guys to follow along while I'm doing the thing. So I'll walk you through every basically every single experiment that we're going to do. And then there is a grand rounds. There's questions that you'll answer about whatever we did that day. And for every day except for the first lab, there's usually a grand rounds. And what that means is you'll go around to the other tables and look at their information and compile it with a question associated with the grand rounds. So that we can go see other examples of what the results look like. Because your table's results might look different than somebody else's, but what's going to be on the exam might not be what you saw, right? It might be something slightly different, but we need to be able to interpret those results based on whatever we're looking at, not just your sample. My lab exams are practical exams. So there will be actual microscopes set up that I'll expect you guys to identify the stuff. I'm not, and please don't make me, okay? But as long as we are learning well in the class, I'm not going to tell you guys are using the microscopes, okay? It's okay to ask for help, right? But as long as I see that everybody's kind of has the idea of how to use the microscopes correctly, I'm not going to test you on how to use the microscope. We're not going to have like a basic microscope setup and you have to set it up and focus and everything like that. They should already be set up like that on the exams. However, during the lab, you're going to make your slide and I'm going to walk you through how to use the microscope and I'm going to expect you to understand how to do that basically from there on out. And there are things we'll talk about in the lab relating to using the microscopes. So the in-lab exercises, we will fill those out in the lab and then you take a picture of what you filled out and upload it or save the file if you're doing it on your laptop or computer or whatever. You can type them in and then save the file and upload it or whatever. And then I grade that for the in-lab stuff. It's largely participation-based, as long as I said you're in the realm of what you're supposed to be talking about. Some of the questions, if you're just wrong on them, I'll count you off half a point or something for it. But generally most of these projects and things like that are supposed to be participation-based, okay? It's the quizzes that are going to be right or wrong, and it's the exams that are going to be right or wrong. I will say on my exams, those short answer questions that I told you guys about, where it's like 1 or 2 words, maybe a couple sentences at most. There is an option there. If I'm asking you to tell me what this molecule is that enters the Krebs cycle or something like that, and you don't remember what it is, but you remember that viruses are acellular pathogens, but I didn't ask that on the test, but you studied it and you remember it, and it wasn't on the test. And you can state that in your short answer, and you won't get full credit, but you get it half a point. And sometimes that makes a difference. So I do give partial credit, like out of the 2 points that you can get for a short answer question, you can get half a point just for stating a fact that is true from the class that you remember. Okay, can't reuse the same one every time. So it has to be a new one every time that you do that. But if it is relevant and it is correct, you can still get half a point there. And that makes a huge difference in the test overall. Yeah, and then there's post-lab quizzes, same exact concept here. These are 10-minute timed, open note though, and it's only 5 questions. Multiple choice for the quizzes. We'll talk about the unknown lab project in the lab, and we have a lab midterm and a lab final, and that is it. On lecture exam days, okay? On lecture exam days, I have, okay. On lecture exam days, I have it time set aside where we won't be having labs those days. So if we have a lecture exam, there won't be a lab that day. I can't do the same thing for lab exams. I just don't have the time. So on lab exam days, we'll still have a lecture meeting, in-person meeting for lecture, okay? But if you want to join by a Zoom, or if you want to use those as your day where you just lose the points or it's your lowest drop or whatever, that's up to you, okay? So, but we do still have lecture stuff. So those 2 exams will have lecture stuff, but the lecture exams, we won't have labs those days. So you're welcome for that. It's different for my online people who all they have is labs. So that's why I have those days set aside, so that on those days for my online people, those are the days they come into lab at their usual time and take the exam, so they don't have to schedule outside of that. In case you haven't figured it out by the way that I talk about it, I give my exams in person. I have 0 respect for ProctorU and online exam taking. I'm sorry, but I have 0 respect for it. There are so many ways around those platforms that other professors are in denial about. It is wild. So I want to actually assess that you understand the information. It's important to me that you show me that you actually understand that information. And so I give my exams in person. They are on lockdown browser, but you'll come to class. And I do give scratch paper, which is not a luxury you're going to have in nursing school. You're not allowed to brain dump. You're not allowed to have scratch paper, nothing. But I do give scratch paper. And so before the exam, once everybody has their lockdown browser pulled up, I will hand out scratch paper and you can brain dump and then use like, you memorized this thing, you just write it down real quick and now you can refer to it during the exam. You can do that for my exams if you want to, but you just can't pull it from your notes. Okay? So you can't use your notes on my exam. You have to brain dump it, but really, okay? There are extra credit opportunities. We have these Unit Connect. You guys know what this is. Tell me that you don't, right? So if you have pretty much any of our science-based classes, most of them have Connect homework. A lot of our other pre-req classes do. So McGraw-Hill has Connect, and it's that chapter reading. I don't have a lot of respect for it either. But if you are somebody that likes those or wants to take notes from those, or it helps you actually connect with your concepts, I recommend doing these before the concept maps, then watching the lecture and doing the concept map. That's my recommendation, but do it however you want. These aren't due until right before each unit exam. But if you're going to do the extra credit for these, they're due before each unit exam. Okay. So that's the chapter thing. You know what it is. I have mine set to the minimum. So it should be 30 minutes, should be mine. Anybody in here taking physiology yet? Nobody? We have one person, a couple people. Okay. So if you have taken physiology yet, you don't know. But if you have, then you do know that Dr. Shearer's Connect assignments are hours. We're talking 3 to 5. So when I'm saying I'm third, mine's at the lowest I can get it, that's why. Those are wild. All right. And then the lab concept maps. This is the exact same thing as what we have for the lecture, but you can do them for the lab for extra credit. They're not required as an assignment. They're extra credit for the lab. Okay. Concept maps. And then also, if you complete my course evaluations, you can get more extra credit as well. So I have that split up where you get half of an extra credit point, half of a point of your grade added on to your overall grade. So this isn't factored in with points with something. I don't do points on my class, so I don't have the patience for that math. So mine is a percentage-based course. So if you're having issues figuring out your grade or how things relate, play with your grade book, like What If Predictor. Otherwise, if it's still confusing, come and see me. Once you start getting full credit on a assignment and you have everything kept up and it's due, the way that percentage-based courses work, your grade is not going to go up from there. That's how points-based courses work. But in the end, overall, it's the exact same. So keep up with your, regular participation-based stuff, your concept maps, your lecture application activity, come in and participate, whatever. And those will stay at 100%. And that'll keep that 5% of your grade at 100% of that 5%. But if you slack off, you will see a drop. Watch it drop. So that's the difference between how that grading scale is going to look, but in the end, it operates the same overall. So, all right, everybody clear on the setup of the course and kind of what to expect with that? You can navigate it through your assignments list with your to-do list. So it's basically like in order of what's due. You can also go to the home page or the syllabus. My home page is my syllabus. And click on the jump to today thing. And it always does this thing where it brings up my syllabus pictures, but just scroll down. Okay, so I do weekly reviews. This is this question that a student had online. Will there be any Zoom meeting for reviews for the exams or the labs or anything like that? So every Thursday, I do a review. Every Thursday at 4:45 p.m. and there will be an announcement about it on Canvas. And I'll remind you every week as well. But 4:45 p.m. every single Thursday, I do a Zoom review. And I do a basic review over the topics for the chapters that we covered that week. I don't review the lab stuff on there. I just review the lecture stuff on there. So it's the lecture topics that I'll review. And I go over some of the most missed topics, usually 2 or maybe 3 most missed topics in those areas as well. So I have some questions that I write. One of them will be very basic, and one is usually harder than what you'll see on the exam. But if we can think through that harder question, hopefully we can think through the exam questions, right? So that is every single Thursday. I'll have that. That is live via Zoom, and I do record it, and I will post it on your discussion boards. So even if you can't attend, you don't have to miss out on the content that I cover there. Okay. So that's a good question. That'll be, like I said, I'll post announcements about it every week, reminding you about it. And I will post the slides that go with it and the recordings and the AI summary that the AI makes, all in the discussion board on the discussions area on Canvas. Okay. So if you click on that, that would be over there. But yeah, so if you go to jump to today on the syllabus, it'll run you through all of the assignments and they're due in whatever order. that they're set up to be doing. I also send out weekly reminders on Friday mornings for all of my sections. Friday at 8 a.m., you will get an announcement saying, this is what's due by Sunday at midnight. So on Friday at 8 a.m., you must have these things done by Sunday at midnight. And then it'll also have a section saying, before our next weekly reminder of what's due, these things are due. So these things are due by Sunday, and these things are due this week on these days at these times. Just to remind you guys, so if you're following through here, you should be fine. But if you also need that extra reminder to make sure you're checking your boxes, that's coming out too. It'll also remind you of what concepts we covered that week. So I mean, I'm not covering my bases. Right. So there's no excuse for missing assignments. You definitely get notified here. You get notified on the assignments list. You get notified on your to-do listing, on your calendar, as well as you'll get reminders from me. But if you're more of a modules person, right? So my modules are set up in a way. Come on. So slow. We have our first up module. You have to complete everything in here that's required. So this isn't my student view, but it'll pop up with a little check mark or a little circle there if you have completed it or not, respectively. Okay. So the ones that are required, actually, let's look at it in student view. Okay. So the ones that are required, if you haven't done it, it has a circle. But if you do the thing, and usually it's just submit, like this one requires that you submit the assignment. It's just an overview of what the course is about. If you submit it, then it'll show up with a check mark. And then syllabus quiz. If you submit it, it'll show up with a check mark. It requires that this one gets you have to get a 5 out of 5 on it. Okay. You can repeat it as many times as you need to. Lab safety document. You just have to open this. Okay. So I opened this. So now if I go back and refresh, I have to refresh it. Hold on. Then it should have a check mark there saying that. Yeah, there you go. So all I had to do is open it. Watch the video. Again, if you open it, you'll go back, refresh, and it'll be a check mark. Okay, just saying. But and then your lockdown browser test. So you have to knock all of these out, and then you can open up the rest of the stuff. Once all those circles become check marks, you can open up the other stuff in the course. I have information on note taking. You see how mine is grayed out because my test student hasn't completed all of the stuff in the first up module. Once you do that, it should allow you to access everything else. We've got your syllabus on there. We've got the course schedule, information about me, the Zoom link. The Zoom link is also over here on the left. Anytime I have Zoom, it is the same link every single time, every time. So it's always going to be that Zoom link whenever we meet, whether it is reviews for exams. My lecture exams, I don't review the whole unit. I do those weekly reviews where I cover those weekly content, right? And then the night before the exam, so actually Sunday before the exam, whether you're on Monday or Tuesday schedules, Sunday at like 8 p.m., I have a review over the test. But what I mean by review is I held a Kahoot game session. It's like 70 to 75 questions that I wrote from unit 1 that are not the questions on the test, but they test the same concepts, okay? And so I hold a game session with those. So if you can't join in live with those, that's okay. I still post the link and you can click through them on your own and work through them on your own. But when I do it live, number one, it makes sure that you're able to figure it out in a situation where you're timed to figure it out. And number two, it's funner because it's on gaming instead of when you do it on your own, it's just basic click through the answers type of a quiz. And then number three is after each session that we'll play like 10 minutes of that quiz in a game. And then I will find what questions people did the worst on. And I usually like go over those like top 3 worst performing questions and I explain them a little bit better. And then we'll play another 10 minutes and then I'll do the same thing again. And we'll keep doing that throughout the whole, I usually have for an hour to an hour and a half. And so I'm not leading that. I'm letting you guys play a game. And at the end of it, I just go over what people perform the worst on it, right? So that's how I do my unit prep. And then the lab exams, I will prep by, we have an actual review day set aside for each lab exam. So in lab, and I will broadcast it via Zoom. So as long as you're attending Zoom or in person, I don't care on those days. But those reviews we will do in person, and it is Kahoot based as well. But I break down everything in detail and go over everything in detail. So it really helps a lot to be participating in those when we have the lab reviews. But those are the reviews that I'll hold for the lab midterm and the lab final. So those are scheduled in the schedule for that stuff. But yes, so your weekly stuff, we have an overview. This is where you'll find your learning objectives, a reminder about the disease case study project, your lab manual, your lab learning objectives, study sheets and stuff like that sometimes will be found up here too. So this is like your basic like overview of everything that you're expected to learn. Then the preview stuff is stuff that's either due before lecture or before lab. So again, the before lecture stuff, those chapter homeworks, they're extra credit. You don't have to do them, but if you do, I recommend that you do it before. This is a recommendation, okay? But the lab stuff is actually due. You have to do that stuff before the lab. Okay, so that's preview stuff, learn stuff. For here, this is your concept map that you will have done beforehand. This is where you're supposed to have watched the lecture and learned that and put it into a thing. And then the lab is the lab concept map. It is extra credit if you choose to do that. Yes.
So if we can learn everything through the slides and the lectures, are we allowed to opt out of the textbook?
I wouldn't recommend it. So no, so that's because all the lab stuff, the lab homework, the pre-labs and stuff like that come with the textbook.
Okay,
That's part of the textbook subscription.
There was 2 textbooks for, I think.
So I made an announcement about this, and some of you may have seen it already, I don't know, but there is the Marjorie Kelly one. That is the actual textbook for the course, and that's where your pre-labs are going to be. Top Hat, we're not ever going to use it, and I've already contacted the bookstores to refund you guys for that, but I don't know what the holdup is with it. That was their mistake on their part. They copied over my wrong semester for that, so that was not a me problem. That was a them problem. But I've contacted them, and they've told me that they're going to remove Top Hat, so don't click on Top Hat if you haven't already. If you have, it shouldn't mean anything. They should still be removing it or whatever. But it's a waste of your time to try to engage with that. There's nothing there. So Top Hat isn't a thing. But the other thing is, and that's where your pre-labs will be, is in that textbook. It's the main textbook. And I also wouldn't recommend getting rid of the textbook either, just on the lecture side of things, because it's going to be a really good resource for your disease case study project. You can copy like images and stuff out of there and put it into your thing, because I expect you to explain your disease, not just tell me what signs and symptoms are and give me a thumbs up, right? You have to explain it in terms of what we've learned. So I feel like the textbook is a good source for stuff like that. They also have really good like practice stuff and study resources on there if you haven't actually engaged with that McGraw-Hill textbook content before. Anyways, so that's the learn stuff, and then the apply stuff. This is what we are doing here in person in class, having those discussions and those Kahoots. We'll have case studies that we'll break down and stuff like that. So this is your lecture application activity or your in-lab exercise. That makes sense. We're applying that stuff, right? For our assessment stuff, this is your quizzes or your exams, depending on what the week is. And then review, this is all optional, but we do have study guides and things like that to help you prepare. And that'll should appear in every single weekly module. Yeah.
For every week, will they be labeled like learn, apply? So we can, okay.
Every week is set up exactly like this. And so if we don't have something that day, it'll say NA, but it'll still be there so that you can make sure that you're following that stuff. So if you're a module person, my modules are very broken down into sections and you can know what's going on in each, and they should be the same from week to week. Yes.
If we attend through Zoom, do we need that to do that at the time of class, or can we do it through recording and then send you?
So you have to do it at the time of class for it to be credit, but if you have a situation like your kid is sick or you're sick or you have work that you couldn't get out of that day, all of those things, if you watch the video later, there's a makeup thing that I have for stuff like that, but they have to be verifiable excuses. You can't just not come that day and be like, I felt sick. Like, you have to prove to me why I'm giving you this special accommodation, right? So yeah, so if your kid is sick or you couldn't get out of work that day or your shift changed or something like that, send me photo evidence of something relating to that, so we have it documented. And then what you would do is you would play through the Kahoot quiz, which there will be a link for that. You would email me and let me know, and I'll send you the Kahoot link and I'll tell you, just answer all the questions on that sheet that's on there, the stuff we work through usually every day. Yes.
Are we able to in about?
So what's your due date? That's rough. So and that's just me being honest, right? So we do have an attendance policy for the lab. So if you miss 5 labs, you fail the course, or 6 labs. You can miss 5, but if you miss 6, you fail automatically.
I don't plan on this.
So if it works out that way, right? So we'll cross our fingers for you that everything works out that way. because we want, you know, a nice, happy, healthy pregnancy and birth for you and baby. But, so if it works out that way, then, we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. Yes. And so we'll basically probably you, because you have a special circumstance and it's documented and you've told me about it ahead of time. We'll probably basically convert you specifically to an online version of the course. And so I won't have it set up that way, but I will have to just deliver it that way to you. So that's fine. If you can keep up with that information. And like when you get closer to your due date, remind me about it. Like when you're like, I think I want to start working ahead because it's coming, let me know and I'll send you the links and stuff so you can do that stuff. Yeah. So the lab is different. And this is mandated by the state. When I say like you fail automatically at 6 absences, that's mandated by the state. It's mandated by OSU's Board of Regents. And so that's not something I can change. For lab-based courses, you have to have a certain percentage in person. And so if you miss that percentage, then you fail automatically. Fail, not like withdraw, not incomplete, fail, F on your transcript. So if you get 5 absences, I will email you and let you know, like you're in danger zone. I have that happen sometimes, and some people push it on purpose. That's fine. That's your choice. But if you get to 5, I will email you and let you know, do not miss another day or I fail you. It doesn't matter if it's the end of the semester. F, an actual F. So don't let that happen to you. And I will try to keep on top of it, but you need to be responsible with it too. Okay. So I'll say that. So if we get to that point and you're having a baby and we know that it's coming ahead of time, and if something ends up going, I don't, you know, cross my fingers, all the blessings in the world to that this going appropriately. But if something did happen that like kept you out of class longer than you anticipate, then just email me or have somebody email me and we'll put you on an incomplete and we'll figure out how to work around that. Okay. All right. But don't let it get to that point is what I'm saying. Get to me before you get to that point. If there's a situation that is out of your control like that. All right. Any other questions? Okay, because we're going to jump into chapters 1 and 3. It should be kind of short today. I'll walk you through the questions today, but we're still going to play the Kahoot together. So we have an hour and we're going to spend that hour. So this is how the Kahoots will normally go is I'll put them up on the screen like this. And you guys go to either kahoot.it, literally just you type in kahoot.it, or you can go on your app on your phone or your laptop or whatever. You have the app, it's Kahoot. So everybody will need to sign in, and this is where your credit for participating today will come from, is from doing these Kahoots. Normally it has nice, happy, pretty sounds. This is up. There we go. So if you go to kahoot.it, you'll just type in that number that's at the top. Or if you have a phone, you can also use the QR code.
Basically, we have to finish all the stuff that you have before we can open up anything.
Yeah, that first up module has to be finished before you can open up anything, but it should be pretty quick to go through those things. The only thing that's going to suck is that lockdown browser quiz, because everybody hates lockdown browser, but knock it out. Oh yes, email address when you guys are logging into this. I prefer that it be something that has some part of your name, first or last, I don't care. But that helps me track participation. And we are going to call on people randomly today. You're not going to know the answer, but that'll at least get you guys familiar with the process, okay? Once my laptop. Right, make sure everybody is signed in. There should be. All right, everybody sign in. Everybody ready? Wow. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so the other thing is, if you at some point come in late or something like that, you can always join late. The number will always appear at the bottom of the screen too, so you can join late.
It's actually But other than good notes, did you have any recommendations for tools or supplies?
So definitely good notes. I would say if you want help with figuring out the concepts, Amoeba Sisters is a really good resource on YouTube. Like their videos explain a lot of the concepts, like what we'll learn in there. You can use YouTube videos, other YouTube videos, but I found Amoeba Sisters is a really good resource. Yes, Amoeba, Amoeba, which is a term that we will learn in microbiology. We will talk about amoebas. Okay. Make sure we're signed in one more time. We're going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, it's on YouTube. Okay, so this is chapter 1. First question is, how do we define a microorganism? What is a microorganism? Do your best guess here. Don't worry about being wrong or whatever. So our answer here is any organism that's too small to be seen with the naked eye. And so this is where I would say, okay, so now we know what the right answer is. And I might say, John Johnston, where's John? Right, John, tell me why bacteria is the wrong answer. Do you have a guess?
But it's a type of microorganism.
It's not the unified overall word, right? So this is an excellent answer to that question. This is a pretty basic question, so we can kind of guess at what this would be. But this is why also we would need to have done those concept maps before coming in, so we can actually engage with this part here. That would be what I would say for John counts as his credit for participating in the in-class activity, okay? So that he would be done now. So I might even say omna. Why wouldn't it be unicellular organisms? Do you have any guess on what that would be? It's okay if you don't today.
It's more, it's not a broad, I mean, the question is pretty broad and that's.
Right. So it's sort of similar to what John was saying, right? When he said bacteria is one of the types of microorganisms. Unicellular organisms, it's a bigger thing than bacteria, right? But there are actually some multicellular organisms that will fall into microorganisms and what we study in microbiology. So an example of that actually would be the helminths, since that's a fancy word for our parasitic worms. And so we consider parasitic worms, some of them we can see with the naked eye. We might call that macrobiology, but they are hiding inside of your body. And you, as a physician or as a healthcare person, looking at a pet or a person with a worm disease, you might not see the worms. You might not see it in their poop. You might not see it anywhere on their body or anything like that, but their signs and symptoms point to this. And so oftentimes when we're diagnosing those parasitic worm diseases, we're looking for the larvae or we're looking for the eggs. Those are multicellular organisms, but their larvae and their eggs are often secreted in urine or feces or found in blood. And so those are microscopic, right? Those can't be seen with the naked eye. We have to use a microscope to see them. Okay, we're tracking on what to expect with this, right? So we're going to keep going. This will show us our leaderboard each time. Viruses are made of eukaryotic cells. Is this true or false? Viruses, are they eukaryotic cells? You guys might not know that today. So I'm not probably going to call on everybody today, but once we start back next week, we'll call on people. Everybody gets called on every day. Okay. So viruses are made of eukaryotic cells. This actually is false. Viruses aren't made of cells. So when you guys are going back to chapter 1 and you're learning a little bit about viruses, and chapter 7 gets into detail with the viruses, okay? Viruses are acellular. Viruses don't have any cells at all. There's no cell to them. And so what we define even as a cell? A cell is a membrane-bound thing, structure, that is capable of multiplying itself without any outside need. Okay, so bacteria, they can multiply themselves. Our cells, if I give them the nutrients that they need, they can actually multiply themselves. So those are cells. They don't have to be a single celled organism. It doesn't have to be the whole organism. But viruses, they are literally just a coating around a genetic information. That's it. So what they do is they get into your cells, hijack your cell's equipment, and use your cells to make copies of the viruses. But they can't do that without the host cell. So do we even consider them to be alive or not? That's a question. That's a question, man. Even science can't answer it. So we'll say that. So viruses are not, they're not any kind of cell. And so we'll kind of get into the difference of eukaryotic cells versus akaryotic or prokaryotic. Those are the same thing. Eukaryotic, eu means true. Akaryotic, like asymptomatic, without karyo means new. And so bacteria and archaea are cellular organisms that don't have a true nucleus. What is a true nucleus? It's membrane bound, has a membrane around it, and it has genetic information inside that membrane. It's contained in there. So we are eukaryotes. We have a true nucleus. Bacteria, their DNA is just floating in their cell. They have no membrane bound structures. They do not have mitochondria even. So those are things that you will learn a little bit about in this first unit. Okay. So next question, which came first on Earth? Akaryotes without a nucleus or eukaryotes with a nucleus? Which one do you think came first? All right, so most of us got this one. This is the akaryote. They didn't have a nucleus. And so what we think through something called the endosymbiotic theory, there is actually a lot of evidence supporting this, is that some bacteria type cell ate up another bacteria type cell. It gave it a benefit somehow. The waste that it made, that cell was able to use, and that became a permanent relationship. And over time, membrane-bound structures evolved from that. So fossil records and things like that actually prove that our no nucleus cells existed well before our nucleus having cells. So your mitochondria, for example. So we all know we have most people know the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? So your mitochondria are structured in eukaryotic cells that produces energy for the cell. Well, they are a membrane-bound structure. It actually has two membranes on it. And we'll talk about what all that is for and does in chapter 5. But, and a lot in chapter 10. But it has two membranes. It has its own genome in there, and it's in a big old circle. Whereas our genes, as I'm sure you know, X's, right? They're linear. So we have multiple X's, but bacteria have one circle genome. So does your mitochondria. Your gene in your nucleus do not code for mitochondria at all. It has its own gene that came with it. Also, mitochondria, its own gene that came with it, looks like bacterial DNA, matches bacterial DNA, and the ribosomes in your mitochondria, they have their own ribosomes. That's what makes your protein. The ribosomes in the mitochondria are the same as bacterial ribosomes, not the same as your own cells' ribosomes. Wild, right? So there's other things too that point to those used to be bacteria, and they've evolved to a structure that's now permanent in our cells. Anybody know where you get your own mitochondria from? The mom, mother, exactly. So the egg, because the sperm is too small to carry a mitochondria, every single person in this room, your mitochondria came from your mom directly. So we call it maternal mitochondrial DNA. But that's because the sperm is too small to carry that mitochondria with it. It has to already have its energy packed in. No, you're good.
Like kind of genetic stuff that they use for the tracking.
Yes, and evolutionary changes and things like that. We often use the mitochondrial DNA. Everybody has to have a mitochondria, and we can make comparisons based on that mitochondrial DNA from person to person. Yes. All right, next question. We're tracking well. You guys are doing great. True or false? Plants are the #1 photosynthetic oxygen producers. Y'all answering quick. I was about to give you a little bit of a hint. Let me stop you though. What? I'm only judging you a little. Y'all in microbiology. All right. So as it turns out, this isn't too far from what you're thinking. Okay. So we're all thinking the green things make the oxygen in our environment. And you're absolutely right. It's just actually there's more algae. And algae, this is the thing that you might not have known. Algae are not plants. They are not. So they're not archaea either. They are in their own category. They're called protista. And so protista includes algae and it includes protozoa like malaria and amoebas. So stuff like that, right? So those things fall into protista. And so they are actually microbes. And the reason that they're different than plants is they don't have true tissues. And so their cellular makeup and things like that. But are they photosynthetic? Yes. So plankton and algae are actually by far outnumber the plants on the planet and make most of the oxygen on the planet. And there's plenty of bacteria that are actually photosynthetic. We call them cyanobacteria. And it's actually believed that when Earth first existed, and there's evidence of this in our soil back billions, not millions, billions of years, when Earth was brand new, we had no oxygen in the environment at all, none. And so microbes grew. There was sunlight though, and some of them evolved to be able to turn sunlight and make oxygen as a byproduct, a waste product. And that went on for billions of years to the point that now we have enough oxygen to support life on the planet. They turned Earth into having oxygen in the environment. Microbes did that. Why? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. In chapter 1, this covers that stuff if you're interested in that evolutionary biology stuff. Most of our time will be on disease. What is the correct term for disease-causing microorganisms? Hopefully you can figure this one out. So normally, like I said, we'll go through each of the choices and I'll call on somebody, but today I just want to kind of make it through these.
Yeah, but rules on, like, do we have to like ask the person?
Oh, no, so if you need to go to the bathroom, just let me know that you're going and let me know your name so I don't call on you while you're in the bathroom, okay? But yeah, you need to go to the bathroom, just let me know and I'll just make sure I don't call on you while you're gone, okay? There's no rule about that. Like I said, you come in late, if I haven't called you yet, you're solid, okay? And I might even come back to you. If you're like, hey, I came in late and I called you earlier,
Where is,
all the way to the end of the hall. Yes, by the other door, yeah. Okay, so the correct term for disease-causing microorganisms is pathogen. So not all disease-causing organisms are viruses, which are the ones that don't have cells, right? And not all disease-causing organisms are bacteria. So strep, staph, those things are bacterial diseases, right? Viral infections like COVID or the flu. And of course, don't forget about our good friends, the molds, the yeasts. Don't forget about those guys. And don't forget about the protozoa either. Giardia, malaria. We might not have a ton of protozoal diseases, but toxoplasmosis is one. And oh my Lord, do y'all need to be reminded about trichomonas. Trichomonas is the #1 sexually transmitted disease that isn't HPV or herpes. So non-viral sexually transmitted disease. So HPV is the #1. We should know this. And if you don't know this, we'll talk about this later in the semester. Okay, HPV is #1. 90% or more of all sexually active. 90% or more. 90%, not, I'm being completely serious here. This is a real number. 90% or more of sexually active adults will have had HPV at some point. It does not always cause warts. It actually rarely causes any symptoms at all. But it can lead to cervical cancer
If untreated.
if untreated. That's what pap smears are for. All right. So anyways, so HPV, herpes, we all heard it, right? Herpes is for life. It is serious. Okay, herpes is for life. But then trichomonas. Trichomonas is a protozoal infectious disease. It is sexually transmitted and it's very, very common. And if you ever do a rotation at the ER at Integra Southwest, where I used to work in the lab, you will see the hookers all have trick. So pathogen, yeah, pathogen is our big overview word for that, okay? And if you guys ever come in, the door is locked, that was by accident and never on purpose. So just knock and I'll come let you in, okay? All right. Next question. What does germ theory postulate? Germ theory. Well, let's make our guess here. And I'll go over it. Like I said, normally y'all be going over it. This time it's me. All righty, so what does germ theory postulate? It's a very big, vague theory that says communicable diseases are caused by something. And those things that we happen to call them pathogens. Those disease-causing organisms are called pathogens. So this is this idea, they used to think, and if you know, you know, but they used to think that bad smells quite literally caused disease, which is why during the plague, we had the plague masks. They literally stuffed flowers and herbs in the masks. So they thought if they smelled that, they couldn't get sick. Well, let's be clear. If y'all walk around with a bunch of flowers in front of your face, is that going to prevent you from getting COVID? Will you smell it coming? Also want to remind you guys, 1 in 3 people that have COVID multiplying in their body and are infected, multiplying COVID and spreading around like a big petri dish, okay? 1 in 3 of them don't have any symptoms. So whenever you're masking up when you feel bad, think about that, okay? So communicable diseases caused by pathogens. It's not gonna be germs that cause disease or bacteria, because we've already talked about how many diseases aren't caused by bacteria. It's not gonna be all diseases are caused by pathogens isn't correct either, because can you guys name one disease that isn't caused by a pathogen? Don't think too hard, because we're talking about pathogens now. Diabetes, maybe? Other kinds of cancer, and also, and heart disease, stroke, those things are still disease. So disease is defined as any deviation in health. So those are still diseases, they're just not communicable diseases, right? But if it's communicable disease, it has to be caused by something. We don't know that it's necessarily going to be bacteria, viruses, fungi, protozoa, or anything of those. But it has to be something was there. And they used to think if they left their meat out on a tabletop and it got maggots on it, that those spontaneously generated from the meat. They had no idea about things that happened that were microscopic. And so what this guy, Louis Pasteur, is the guy that's famous for this. We will get tested on that. That's part of what you have to knock out with your learning objectives, okay? Louis Pasteur designed this experiment where he took like boiled sterilized broth and he left it either open, or he had one that he sterilized that had this big old long snaking neck on it that was harder for air to get into it, but it still got some air. And the broth that had air, but it was harder to get into, didn't grow anything. But the broth that was open to the environment grew a thing. And he's like, clearly it doesn't just originate from the broth. It had to originate from outside the broth. It seems so basic and we take it for granted now, but back then they had no concept of germs. So that's the germ theory. All right, question 7. Which scientists performed those experiments that disproved spontaneous generation? Supporting germ theory, this guy that I just mentioned. Let's see if you remember the name. I'm not holding it against you if you don't. You need to know a few old guy names here or there, okay? This is Pasteur. So Pasteur is the guy that designed that experiment. He had a guy that worked along with him called Robert Koch. And Robert Koch was a guy that he basically designed like how to determine what pathogen causes a disease. He discovered anthrax that way. Lister is the guy that decided that maybe I should clean my operating table sometimes. Quite literally, right? Quite literally, this is the guy that said maybe we should sometimes clean things because it's getting gross up in here. So he started connecting germ theory with how it affects the patients. And so he started cleaning his operating theaters with phenol carbolic acid. So it's the very first disinfectant ever used. And then later on, Semmelweis was the guy that advocated for washing your hands. He noticed that women that were giving birth were for some reason having extremely high numbers of sepsis. And all they did was give birth. What happened was those doctors never washed their hands between patients and autopsies and all sorts of things. They just never washed their hands. So those women became infected. And the reason that he found this out is because women that gave birth through midwives washed their hands. So if you gave birth through a midwife, those women weren't dying. He noticed the difference. They were washing their hands. They weren't. Maybe. And so there we have another person to kind of credit with something like that, which is Florence Nightingale. She's the mother of nursing. She's well known to be the mother of nursing. Florence Nightingale during the Crimean War noticed that the men that were with stab wounds and things like that were dying of dysentery, which you don't get from a stab wound, okay? It's like bloody diarrhea. Bloody, intense, mucousy diarrhea is dysentery. It's actually a more general term. It's not a specific disease, okay? So the GI disease, you get that because of things that are from fecal oral route, okay? And so why were all of these soldiers with stab wounds dying from fecal oral route infections? Because doctors weren't washing their hands, y'all. They were pooping and coming and touching on these patients and getting them infected. And so then Florence Nightingale started introducing hygiene practices, and then the death mortality rates of those patients went down dramatically. Just from simple hygiene practices. So when we start thinking about how, oh, back in the old days, here's another thing I'll bring up. We think back in the old days, they ate organic, didn't they? And they didn't get vaccines, did they? You know what the average lifespan was for somebody in the 1800s? 35. Let that sink in. You know what the average lifespan was of a human in the caveman days? 30. So between caveman days, thousands of years later to the 1800s, they ate organic and they never got vaccines. Let that sink in. What's the average lifespan today? 80? Probably. I mean, the last census was like a decade ago and it was 76 I feel like that's a pretty good improvement in just a couple hundred years. And what was the change? I'm not saying that non-organic food played in that, but definitely vaccines did. Come at me. Okay, that's the other thing I will mention, and it will come up because I have a pedestal that I stand on sometimes, okay? In this course, we teach vaccines. And we teach about their benefits. And if you have arguments about how they cause harm, they do. Okay, so we do not compare. Let's think with our brains for a minute and you can tell your loved ones the same. We do not compare getting a vaccine to not getting a vaccine. We compare getting the vaccine and its risks to having the disease and the disease's risks. Okay, anybody know how many people? What's the mortality, the death rate of having measles? Anybody know? Uh-oh, it didn't occur to us that you could die from measles, did it? 1 in 1,000. Measles, I want to put this in perspective, the most contagious disease in the entire world is measles. And so when you think, I haven't really seen anybody with measles though, why do you think? Because vaccine, the most effective vaccine that we have ever designed on the entire planet. So you haven't seen people with measles because they're vaccinated and it holds for pretty much your whole lifetime. So once those people die and the people that haven't been vaccinated start getting older and being around each other, when you have the measles, if you're around unvaccinated people, 9 of every 10 people that you are in the same room with will get the measles. The measles is so contagious that if I had the measles right now, without coughing or anything like that, just having been here and talked to you, 90% of you guys would have gotten the measles. And the people that come in here after us for the next 8 hours would also get the measles. 9 out of 10 of them. That's how contagious the measles is. And 1 in 1,000 people that get it will die, usually from encephalitis or meningitis. So yes, might you have a reaction to the vaccine? Maybe. Will you get autism from the vaccine? Hard no. Hard no. Hard no. No. That's not where autism comes from. When I talk about where autism comes from, we haven't talked about that. We haven't yet. But it doesn't come from the measles vaccine. It doesn't. There's no evidence that supports that. None. And the only paper that was ever published that supported that was redacted, and the man lost his medical license, and he now works for RFK. We're being honest. I'm just stating facts. Okay? I'm just stating facts. So anyways, and if you ever want to argue about vaccines, their safety, their efficacy, how they work, why mRNA vaccines can't become part of your DNA and things like that, we'll talk about that through the course. It's just part of the course. But I studied advanced immunology with the man that won the Nobel Prize for developing the COVID vaccine. That's who I took my advanced immunology courses with. So if you're going to come have those discussions with me, or if you want your loved ones to have those discussions with me, come with evidence, not opinions. Because I'm very well educated on this topic. I went to an Ivy League school and studied that stuff there. So, all right, so let's move on. Which scientist introduced aseptic technique to operating rooms? I did mention this guy just a couple minutes ago while I was not on my pedestal. Probably music videos to talk about that long. Remember Pasteur did the germ theory? So the guy that came up with cleaning the operating theaters, that was Lister, like Listerine, which is where Listerine came from originally, but now it's not that chemical anymore. Phenol is actually pretty bad. Don't ingest it if you can help it. Taxonomy. What is it? I mean, we're in microbiology, so hopefully you can rule out a couple of these things without. All right, so there's little acronyms you can make up with this stuff. So it's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So King Philip, I have to say the kingdom, phylum, class, order, or else I don't remember which one is which. King Philip came over for good spaghetti. That's one way you can remember it. Domain usually comes before kingdom. There's 3 domains: eukarya, bacteria, and archaea. Bacteria and archaea look the same under a microscope, but they're so drastically different from one another. They're actually in their own domains. And then eukarya is us, plants, the helminths, the fungi, the yeast. Yeasts are fungi, by the way. All right. So taxonomy is the scientific study of organizing those guys for study. Let me get through this. Binomial nomenclature. Binomial means two, bi, nome, name. Two name, naming. All right, so that's the genus and species. So Staphylococcus aureus. The genus is Staphylococcus, the species is Staphylococcus aureus. So that second word, aureus, actually has its own term. That's called a specific epithet. So for chapter stuff, so when you make your concept maps, okay? So this is our thing for chapter 1. I'm going to post the link for chapter 3. We're not going to do it today, but I'm going to go over the application activities. Remember, we have until 10:50 in here. Since we had our little intro today, I'm not going to take the time with that. So I'll leave it up to you guys to play through the Kahoot for chapter 3. It won't be required, but I'll post it there for you guys to do your review with it if you want to. And if you have any questions about those questions, of course, you can come to me at any time. Okay. So let's just do this with one. Let me see if I can open on this. Bear with me. Oh my gosh, there's a lot open. In class activities. Yeah, this will be easier for you guys to see it. All right, so this would be our thing that we would normally do after the Kahoot quizzes. So I usually do chapter 1 Kahoot quiz, and then we'll do this activity. Normally when I have a big spiel to give, we'll all have a mini break, maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll do Kahoot quiz for chapter 3, and then chapter 3 application, okay? So chapter 1 application activity, categorize the following scenarios. I'm gonna walk you through these this time, okay? Categorize the following scenarios based on what type of pathogen they have. Is it a eukaryote, an akaryote, acellular, or no pathogen? So over on the side, I don't have a pen for this, do I? No. So over on the side, we could, I'm gonna type it out. Eukaryote, I'm gonna make some notes here. I expect you guys would know this if we actually had done the concept maps beforehand, right? Eukaryote, they have a true nucleus. Anybody remember what that means to have a true nucleus? What do you have to, where is your genetic information in a cell that has a true nucleus? Anybody remember? It's in the nucleus, it's in a membrane-bound nucleus. Okay, so true nucleus is membrane-bound nucleus. Akaryotes, they do not have a nucleus. They don't have any membrane-bound organelles, like even a mitochondria inside of their cells. No membrane-bound organelles. In the next chapters, we'll get into more depth about what each organelle is, what it does, what an organelle is, and all that stuff. But for now, I feel like the name kind of suggests what it is. Like it has a mini organ within the cell. Like you have a liver, that's a unit in your body that does something for you. A mitochondria is a unit in your cells that does something for your cell. So an organelle, a tiny organ. All right, let's put some space between so we can see them. What is an acellular pathogen? Pathogens that don't have cells. I mean, quite literally. Acellular, A being without, cell. Quite literally. There's 2 major groups of acellular pathogens, the virus, which we talked about previously, and the prion. Prion diseases are extremely rare. Okay, so all a prion is the misfolded protein. So you might have a protein in your brain that does a normal function for your brain. And at some point, it became misfolded. Oftentimes, this is because it saw another misfolded guy and it said, oh, I'd rather fold like that. But now, because its structure is messed up, number 1, it can't perform its function anymore. Proteins often rely very heavily on their structure to function. We learned about this in chapter 2. Well, we should be reminded about this in chapter 2 because you should have learned it in chemistry. But also, most proteins fold in our body with the water-loving stuff on the outside, hydrophilic stuff on the outside, because your body's made of water, and the hydrophobic stuff, the water-fearing stuff on the inside. And they fold that way to mix better with what's going on in your body. But when you become misfolded, the water-fearing stuff is on the outside, so it doesn't interact well with your cells. And this causes those misfolded proteins to stick together. And when they stick together, it creates holes in the brain. And we call this a spongiform encephalopathy, which is a fancy word for spongy, like a form, like a sponge, literally like it sounds like. Sponge form, with holes in it. Encephalopathy is a long fancy word. Encephalo means your brain, pathy means disease. So sponge hole brain disease is what spongiform encephalopathy means. Okay. And we actually see this presentation in Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's, this happens not because of a prion, which is an infectious version, but because your own body gets bad at holding proteins for some reason. And then this happens because of age. So it's not true prion disease, but it presents very, very similarly. So what we see is you ingest it's usually from ingestion, but it can get in any way in the body that anything else can. You ingest, let's say, a misfolded protein, it causes your other proteins to misfold. They aggregate in your brain and they cause holes. And how that presents in the patient is with dementia and similar cognitive function issues. So that's how spongiform encephalopathies will present. And the most famous version of this is mad cow disease. So people get mad cow disease. We call that variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. You can also just have Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a predisposition to that happening, just genetically. There's fatal familial insomnia, which is a similar thing that leads to proteins involved in sleep, where they literally cannot sleep anymore. They physically couldn't, no matter how tired they get, and they die because of that. And then there's Kuru, which is where we have a tribe in New Guinea where the people eat their loved ones to venerate them. It's cannibalism, but it's not cannibalism for cannibalism's sake. It's because they want their loved one to be part of them and forever. And so they consume the body, and then that causes their misfolded proteins to spread to people. Because it's concentrated in nervous tissue, we usually see this presenting in children and women because the men get the choice cuts. So those are prion diseases. In animals, the prion disease that we see the most is chronic wasting disease in deer. It's extremely common, and it's becoming worse and worse here in the United States. If you're a hunter, you're supposed to have your deer tested for chronic wasting disease. If you haven't been doing that, or your loved one hasn't been doing that, then please tell them to do that. It's actually incredibly vital, because that could potentially spread to people later on. So it doesn't right now, but it has the potentiality to. There's other ones too, but those are just misfolded proteins. Now, the problem with the prion diseases, like mad cow disease, is they take about 30 years for signs and symptoms to show. And once you have signs and symptoms, there's nothing we can do for you. It's 100% fatal. You usually die within a year or two. So, and it's usually dementia and things like that, and it's extremely hard to diagnose. The only way we can diagnose that, we can test spinal fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. We can test that, but we have to send it to Los Alamos to get tested. It's the only lab in the entire United States that tests for it. Or we'll have to wait until the autopsy, and it shows those spongiform encephalopathy in there. So, and like I said, there's not much we can do to treat patients that have that. It's not much we can do to treat any patient that has any dementia, right? It's more or less just palliative care at that point. So it's the same thing with these prion diseases. Right, and then no pathogens. There are diseases, remember, like diabetes and things like that, that aren't caused by pathogens. All right, some diseases that you might not think are caused by pathogens might actually be linked to having a pathogen. There is strong evidence indicating that having had certain kinds of infections predispose you to things like autoimmune diseases like lupus and things like that. And so there might be a link there that we don't quite understand yet. So we'll get into some of that in later chapters. So first scenario, a patient that has a sore throat. Okay. So no path. Oh, I can't click back on this. Like diabetes. All right, so there's our little reference for that. All right, so first scenario, a patient has a sore throat. They had their throat swabbed and cultured. The lab indicates that the pathogen that's causing them is small, round cell arranged in clusters, and it doesn't seem to have a nucleus or organelles. Would you classify that as eukaryote, acellular, or no pathogen? Eukaryote, excellent. A patient with a severe headache, stiff neck, fever, and photophobia. This is what we would call meningitis. So meningitis is defined by its signs and symptoms, not by what causes it. Not like the flu. The flu is defined by what causes it. COVID is defined by what causes it, not the signs and symptoms of the disease, right? But meningitis is defined by its signs and symptoms. So it's called a syndrome because of that. So they've got meningitis. We do a spinal tap. We collect the cerebrospinal fluid. The lab says that this patient with meningitis has nucleated branching cells and the path that is causing this person's illness. So your spinal fluid should be sterile. There should be no microbes in it at all. So if somebody's spinal fluid has cells that have nuclei, what is the cause of the disease? It's going to be eukaryotic, right? So even more specifically, I'll tell you what it is. If they're branching cells like that, it's going to be a fungal meningitis. So it's usually going to be coccidioides or cryptosporidium. Cryptococcus, the Cryptococcus neoformans. So Cryptococcus neoformans is the fungus that causes fungal meningitis most commonly, and it's more common in people that have lowered immune systems. And so this is people with AIDS. If you think AIDS isn't an issue, I've got a statistic for you. Okay? Is it going down in the US? Is the spread of it going down in the US? Yes. Are people becoming more educated about it? Yes. But in South Africa, of all of the people who are of sexually active age, so we're talking about anywhere from 16 up to about 45, okay? Take that population, 50% of them have HIV. Half of the people have HIV in South Africa. Don't just care about our country, okay? Another statistic that's similar to that, but isn't HIV, is tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a thing that we think of as an old world disease. We've had recent outbreaks here even in Oklahoma of it. 1/3 of the world has tuberculosis right now. I don't mean in history, I mean right now. 1/3 approximately, it's a little less than 1/3, but it's more than 1/4, has tuberculosis right now. It's not something to scoff at, right? If you guys work in ERs, especially like I said, because my history was with Southwest Integris, I worked for their lab there. You will have homeless people that are coughing. You will do the stains to see if they, and the tests and the chest x-rays to see if they have tuberculosis, and many of them will. And we often see it in tandem with HIV. So it's not something to be scoffed at. These are people too. It's not just about treating the people that are in the upper middle class. All right. So number 2 was eukaryotic. That was a fungal infection. Number 3, patient presents with a runny nose, a sore throat, fatigue, and a low-grade fever. Nasal swab cultures performed in the lab indicate there's no visible cells in the patient's sample, is supposed to say, despite indicating that the patient's illness was contracted from a similarly ill family member. So this person has what sounds like a cold, right? Cold-like symptoms, maybe flu-like symptoms. They have another family member with a similar thing. They got sick after that person, and we aren't seeing any cells. So is this a pathogen causing disease, or is this a no pathogen? So it is pathogen because it's been spread from person to person, and anything spread from person to person has to have a pathogen. Okay. Is it acellular? I'm going to leave you with that. Yes. So this is an acellular pathogen. So this is probably viral, most likely the cold or the flu. So if you were to have had that patient that had meningitis and you saw that their CSF was clear, there was no pathogen in their CSF that you could see with a microscope, then what kind of meningitis would they have had? Probably viral meningitis. We also call that aseptic meningitis. And most people recover from that naturally. Don't need treatment most of the time. All right, number 4, a patient at your clinic is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. All blood work supports this diagnosis, yet the patient blood and stool lack evidence of an infectious cause. So this is still a disease. We have a deviation from what we consider normal human health, but this would be a no pathogen scenario. Number 5, James visited the UK in 1992. 20 years later, he has showed a rapid decline in his mental function, as well as significant dementia. He's only 30 years old. After his death, approximately 1 year after his neurological symptoms began, the autopsy indicates that his brain tissue has holes like a sponge. Cultures of the brain matter do not show any evidence of cellular pathogens. So this is another acellular situation, just like number 4, but this isn't a virus. This is a prion, okay? This is mad cow disease. All right. So we're gonna move on to chapter 3. We haven't done the chapter 3 Kahoot yet, but I do want to talk through the worksheets really quick before we, yes.
Are we supposed to fill this out? and turn it in?
No, so this is not, you don't turn this in. Just normally, we would do the Kahoot and I would call on people, right? And then we would get to this, and as long as you guys are participating in this, you'll get full credit. So like when I'm asking these questions, you guys are like, acellular or acaryotic. If you're participating, then everybody's getting full credit for it. Otherwise, I'm gonna be paying attention, right? If we're all just sitting there and I'm asking the question, you know, sometimes I'll ask that question and you guys are just sitting there quietly. Generally speaking, if you're generally speaking up, then you guys will be fine. But if I get a lot of days where all we're doing is just sitting there waiting for me to answer on these kinds of questions, that's gonna be a problem, right? Yeah, you don't turn anything in for this. This is literally like participation based, and I do that based on your attendance from the but I'm gonna know your guys' names eventually, so watch out. All righty, let me get out of this. This is not. Oh, it's because of this. Okay, really quick, chapter 3. So this is asking us about the 5 I's. So the 5 I's are inoculation, put the sample on some media. This is from chapter 3. The next one is incubation, grow the sample. Whatever things that it needs, warm, moisture, certain number of oxygen in it or no oxygen, whatever it needs to grow, that's the incubation step, all right? The next step is isolation. Separate the sample. Separate whatever's in the sample from other things. If I take a swab of your skin, let's say you suspect that you have MRSA. If I take a big old swab of your skin, is that just gonna have the MRSA on there? No, because you got bacteria all over your skin. You all know this, right? If you have a diarrhea disease, this is the only bacteria that's gonna be in your diarrhea, salmonella. No, you're gonna have the E. coli and stuff that's normally in your colon. So in order to study whatever's causing the disease, we have to be able to separate it from the other things in the sample. So that's the isolation step. Then we're going to do the inspection. This is just running the different tests. And then identification. Using the results of the tests to identify it. Speaks for itself, I feel like. All right. So 5-year-old Liam was brought to Yost Memorial Hospital in May. The chief presenting complaint, we had persistent crusted lesions around Liam's nose and mouth. Further questioning revealed that the lesions began as small red spots, which developed into honey color crusted sores over the course of a few days. No fever, no systemic signs. It really just seems to be kind of local around the face, around the mouth, okay? But other students at the preschool also have similar symptoms. We think this is impetigo. So impetigo is a skin infection caused usually by Staphylococcus aureus or Streptococcus pyogenes, which we'll talk about. This is unit 4 stuff, okay? But this is a bacterial disease, usually caused by Staph aureus, associated with this. When you get little kids that have that crustiness on their face, it happens a lot, right? This is impetigo, that's what that is, right? So we do a swab to collect the sample of the crusted lesion and streak it onto media. This is our inoculation step. So this is what the question is. Read through this and identify where each of the 5 I's are. So this is inoculation, taking the swab and putting it onto media. All right. We used blood auger to see the hemolytic patterns. This is breakdown of red blood cells. Mannitol salt auger, which lets us see if it's Staphylococcus aureus, commonly used for that. We'll learn about it in the lab. And McConkey auger to rule out gram negatives. Gram negatives will grow on McConkey. So these are different kinds of media. And we call these selective and differential media, which is discussed in chapter 3. Okay. You don't need to know all of the media just yet, but we will learn them in the lab and they'll come up later on in the course. Okay. So, so we used that, we inoculated the media, and then we grew the plates for 48 hours at 37. That's our incubation. So we've gone through inoculating some media and incubating the stuff. Both the blood auger and the mannitol salts grow some colonies that have a golden color. We had complete hemolysis on the blood auger, which is breakdown of the red blood cells. And we grew on the mannitol salts and turned it yellow. Both of these things indicate Staphylococcus aureus. So this is a thing that technically, while we also inoculated the media, we also ran tests. So that is where the inspection set is. Okay, that's part of the inspection, but we're going to take it even further. We want to know for sure, is this Staphylococcus aureus? These growth patterns support that, but can we prove it? So what we do next is we take one of those golden colonies, that's isolation. We had separate colonies on our media. We took one of those separate colonies. One colony comes from one cell growing up. So you know what colonies are, right? You've seen the plates, and you get like one lump of cell, that's called a colony. We'll learn about that in the lab. But one colony comes from one cell multiplying up. And so if you can take a sample of that one colony, it's a pure culture now. One species in it. So you don't want them touching each other. But if you find one colony separated from the rest, you can now start a pure culture. And that's the isolation step here. So we took one colony and we even stripped it out onto a quad straight plate, which we'll learn about in lab, but it's basically a way of just spreading out the cells and just making sure that we separated them and grew new colonies. So now we've not only taken a colony, but we spread it out again and made sure it only grows up into that one type of organism. Then we'll take one of those colonies and perform PCR. So PCR is a method that looks at the genetic makeup of something. You can't just run PCR and it tells you what the organism is. You test the PCR for an organism that you think it is. So you have to be testing for staph. You can't just say somebody has a cold, swab their nose, put it in the PCR, and the PCR just tells you if it's the flu. You have to test for the flu with known genetic information from the flu to compare it to. So they did that here. This is PCR. We'll learn about PCR in chapters 6 and 8. Don't worry. Okay. But they did that and it confirmed the genetic information was for Staph aureus. This is running a test inspection and then using all of these things together, what media it grew on and the PCR, we are able to identify it positively as Staphylococcus aureus. That's the identification. So we've gone through all of those 5 eyes and actually figured out where they did that in this case study here. Okay. So that's all of our 5 eyes there. And so with confirmation of Staph aureus as the cause of Liam's skin infection, the patient was prescribed antibiotic cream applied to the lesion 3 times daily. And the mother was instructed to perform proper hygiene practices to prevent it from spreading throughout the family because it is pretty contagious. All right. And he resolved. So that's your little case study there. Some of the case studies that we will be looking at, this is one that is very clearly typed out for you guys. Next week, we'll be doing chapters 2 and 4. So this is chapter 4. We have scientific papers, real scientific papers we're going to be using for our questions and that stuff. And I am going to rely on you guys moving forward from today. You guys are leading all of these discussions more or less. I'll prompt you. I'll either call on you individually or I will ask the question and then we'll go into discussion about the answers, okay? Today I led you, but now you guys know what level of responses I'm expecting from you guys. And I will elaborate on whatever you guys have to say to make sure everything's clear. Okay, we know what to expect from lecture. We good? Today, we're going to lab. We'll start lab here in 10 minutes. 11 is when lab starts. So you can go up there. I'm going right up there. If you have your lab coat today, good job, but you absolutely need it for Wednesday. Okay. Wednesday, you absolutely have to have a lab coat. I would recommend either ordering it on Amazon or going to Walmart or something like that where it's cheaper. What? No. And you don't have to wear pants in my lab either.
Do we need the lab, like for chemistry, to buy like a lab manual, like book?
No.
We don't do that? Okay.